online. How can you tell that?
She's in there. She just has her video turned off right now. She can hear us back?
Christy, are you there? There you are. All right.
I am.
We're going to call to order the Mundelein Elementary School District 75 meeting for Tuesday, February 23rd, 2021. Will the secretary please call the roll?
DuPont. There's a delay on my end, so I. Can you hear me?
Was on.
Hang on.
Christy, can you leave the meeting and rejoin?
Sure. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me? I take that as a no. Okay, never mind. There's, well, the people at home say they can hear me. Can anybody else hear me?
Hear you now.
Okay. So let's try again. DuPont. And I will say there's a delay on hearing anything when there's a microphone, so. Is Rob DuPont there?
I am here, yes.
Thank you. Sorry. Erickson.
He is not here.
Thank you. Fingerhut here. Frice.
Here.
Gallegos.
Here.
St. Clair.
Here.
Holly.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, our first agenda item is citizen comments. Do you have anyone present who wishes to address the board? If there's anyone else, we have 3 people so far in the queue. If there's anyone else that would like to address the board, please click the raise hand icon on the bottom of the screen. When it is your turn to speak, you will be brought into the live session. Please let me remind you that the District 75 board welcomes citizen input. Although we might not always respond to your comments, we hear them. Citizens are reminded to limit their comments to 3 minutes, and also that matters regarding employees or confidential student matters will not be allowed. Okay, who's the first person, please?
Deborah Barnes.
Deborah Barnes is number 1.
Hello, how are you?
Hello.
I wanted to just comment on the 3 o'clock release of the email for the full hybrid option. We didn't even get a notification via text message to check our email. So you just had to check your email. And I actually only found out because someone posted on Facebook because I work till 6 o'clock at night. So again, one of the concerns I have that I voiced to Principal Drake, being a parent in the district, I'm pretty frustrated with the constant changes to the learning model. We haven't even been in this hybrid model for 15 days and there's already a change. Secondly, I would like to address the administration with the lack of preparation for parents in all of the remote learning options. There has been nothing given to parents on guidance, support, expectations, assistance, or anything. Parents are just expected to figure everything out. There's no technology help. You have to email or, well, really email an email address. And if you're not familiar with how to use email because you don't do it, you're then handicapped there because you don't know what to do. So there's constant remote planning days for teachers, and yet the parents are just left to fend for ourselves. And that's probably one of the biggest reasons why this isn't working for parents, because we don't have any guidance from you guys. You're just telling us to go forth and prosper. I doubt you would leave the teachers in that position, considering you're now asking for another remote day, which is not 10 days in advance, Wells, which you had asked for. Actually, you asked for 14. And Dr. Myers said, no, that's too many days. We want to move it to 10, and you agreed to 10. It's 9 days, 9 business days. And parents have to now figure out what to do with their kids on that day. This is very rushed. And, you know, I'm also very concerned about how my daughter that's fully remote right now is going to be engaged when she can't type a question because she's only in first grade. She raises her hand, and if the teachers are working with students in class that could be behaving, could be misbehaving, how are they going to pay attention to a TV monitor or whatever they're going to be using to work with our remote children? I've already, my child who was excelling remote with this hybrid model, it has caused a lot of issues because of the constant schedule changes that she has. Every half hour, she's doing something different, and she's only 7. She can't keep track of all of that. So it's now affecting the kids that were doing well remote. And now you're going to ask for another change and not give parents any assistance that are at home. I mean, I'm sure I'm not the only parent who's had to leave meetings, you know, to sit there and assist our child because they can't access something. You also managed to put in a SIPA filter in the web browser and didn't notify parents about that. And that has caused a lot of issues with being able to access sites. So there's been 0 notification to parents. All right. And I really hope the board can listen and hear how this is affecting the parents, that we're just left to fend for ourselves. And I find myself pretty technologically advanced. I work in IT. And I'm having problems. I actually will tell you that the issue with the search on the browser only recognize school issued Chromebooks. So I was having my daughter use a system that was working better for her until the SIPA filter was added, and she couldn't access anything. So we had to go back to the school and get a new Chromebook when everything was working fine. But you didn't let us know about this filter and what it was going to do to us, or those of us who have decided we wanted to try a different workstation. But again, we're just sitting there being led around like cattle. We're treated like cattle by this administration. And a lot of times our voices are unheard. We email administration and we don't get responses. We don't get callbacks.
Okay.
I'm frustrated.
Are you ready for time limit, please?
I'm sorry, what did you say, Kevin?
I need you to wrap up because you've reached your time limit, please.
Okay, what I would like to say is that as a parent whose child is doing well remote, I am now struggling with my child because of the constant changes that are happening. And I would really like you guys to, I know a lot of you don't have children in the district right now, but this is how it's affecting young children in the district. So I really hope our concerns are heard and not just concerns of parents whose kids are struggling with remote learning. You're now affecting everybody with this change. Thank you.
Thank you. Who's next?
Next is Nicole Russo-Ponsaran.
Can you say that a little louder?
Nicole Russo-Ponsaran.
Okay, I'm not getting the last name, sorry. Just go with Nicole. Nicole, you are next up to address the board.
Yes, hi, thank you. So I have a few points to make. Families obviously have different reasons for staying remote, and I feel like all of the changes have been in the direction of adding support specifically for the in-person learners with less regard of the negative impact on remote learners. My concern is also if the teachers are going to now be doing what I was afraid of before, and then they weren't doing it, and it was good. But the in-person and remote at the same time, the remote learners will have a reduced listening environment, access to auditory visual information. If the teacher and the other students are now wearing masks and on screen, and again, the attention towards the remote learners will be less. So, if somebody gets kicked off of Zoom and needs to be re-entered into the classroom, they lose valuable learning time already. And I can only imagine that's going to get worse. Or if they're asking a question in some of the specials, my daughter doesn't always get called on because there's too many people to manage. And I imagine just it's going to be difficult for those early learners. So, my daughter's in first grade. I am also concerned with the number of changes and the speed at which we're doing the changes, because the kids are still adjusting to the shift that happened earlier this month. I have to set timers for my child so she knows when to switch gears to another course. I'm working full-time from home, and it's just, I'm doing my best and she's doing her best, but it's still a lot of changes, and we need schedules constantly available to us. And the last point I'm going to make, it's may seem more minor and trivial, but material pickup for remote families, it's, the school's willing to make individual accommodations, but I think just in general, extending it beyond the 9 to 5 workday so that parents can get there, maybe have it be a different day, multiple days of the week, have a staff person be willing to stay till 6 o'clock, or make the pickup less frequent so it's not every other week, because as it is now, one of us has to leave work early. I'm managing with kids at home and working from home. My husband's further away. So it's not very conducive for families who are doing the remote learning to only be able to get there during specific times. Again, accommodations have been made on a one-on-one basis, but I think a broader change would just be more helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. Next.
Next is Mrs. Aubrey.
Mrs. Aubrey, you're next to address the board. Mrs. Aubrey, are you there?
She had asked a question in the chat to have us let her know when it's her turn. So I just typed that it was her turn, but.
Thank you, Christy.
But I don't see her response, so I'm not sure. There she is.
I can talk now, right? All right.
Yes,
Thank
go
you.
ahead.
Sorry for the confusion there. So my name is Emily Aubrey, and I have a first grader and an incoming kindergartner in the district. And the last time I addressed the board, I was in person, and it was when I was a music teacher in the district back in about 2017. So currently I'm teaching music in a nearby district, and I'm experiencing the difficulties of teaching and learning in a pandemic, both as a parent as well as a professional. And as a parent, I wanted to thank District 75 for their decision to offer their youngest learners the hybrid learning option during the half-day period. My daughter in first grade was thriving in this situation as she's getting individualized instruction in the building from her teachers twice a week. And then we were really happy she didn't have to worry about the risks of lunch and other things like that, where she wouldn't be wearing a mask. And Washington worked really hard to ensure that she had an afternoon of learning with her asynchronous assignments and her live specials classes. So today's email announcing the switch to a full day concurrent hybrid was very discouraging to me. As someone currently teaching in a concurrent hybrid model, I know firsthand that it is exhausting and full of challenges, not only for staff, but for students. And the concerns of the two parents before me are completely accurate from what I am experiencing in my job. So I'm very disappointed that after 3 weeks of implementing a hybrid that we are changing gears and it's being tossed aside. My daughter was doing well, and it sounds like I'm not the only one. And that really isn't a lot of time to evaluate whether or not a plan was working. like all other parents and teachers, I definitely want our kids back in schools. This has been a difficult year. But as somebody who is teaching and working in a concurrent hybrid situation, I really wish our district would have taken more time to evaluate their decision and ultimately would have avoided the simultaneous model, especially for our youngest students. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Aubrey. Anyone else?
There's.
Okay.
Is Jody Catanese.
Jody, it's your turn to speak to the board.
Good afternoon, everyone. Jody Catanese. I'm a parent of a first grader and a third grader. And at the last meeting, I addressed the board, pleading to get our kids back into hybrid models. So thank you for allowing that to happen. Ever since it happened, my daughter is a completely different person. She's happy, she loves school, and her and my son are both thriving. So I couldn't be happier that they're back in person. And I wasn't sure when we would decide to have our kids back in full time for a longer period of time. And I had planned on joining the board this afternoon or this evening and playing again to get our kids back in full time, because I truly feel like it's the best learning environment for our children. So I'm really pleased that you've made a decision so quickly, especially when we look at the metrics externally. It certainly supports that's the direction that we should be going, along with what we're seeing other districts doing too. I can certainly appreciate the concerns that other parents are voicing on the call relative to concurrent learning. But ultimately, I think our kids back in the classroom, especially at the young ages, is absolutely the right thing to do. So my thanks to you. And as a parent, I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make sure my kid is getting the appropriate learning, not only educational, but again, it's emotional and developmental that is most important to ensure that my kid is getting the support that they need. So my thanks to you to moving quickly. And I recognize there's going to be challenges and it's going to be hard. But I think through partnership with the parents and with the board and with the principals and the teachers, I feel like it's absolutely doable. And, I applaud the district for moving so quickly.
Thank you, Jody. Anyone else?
One more, Daniel Flores.
Daniel, it's your turn to address the board.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Just I'm going to be short and sweet because I got to get out of here, but we're just happy as a family to see the change to full hybrid with the 4 days. As a family that could use someone to go back to work, that'd be great. This is going to be a great opportunity for everyone. And then also we have a fourth grader who really needs that extra in-person learning. And I could just see her thriving a lot more at school and whatnot. So as a family, we're happy. Hopefully it gets approved tonight. And I know either way you guys decide, you're going to have both hands, but you guys will make the right decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel.
That's it.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you everyone who made comments. I forgot at the beginning, welcome everyone to the Zoom meeting. We're going to continue on with the agenda. Our first section is the District 75 reports. We will now hear the report from the business office.
Good evening. Tonight, we're going to be discussing our capacity analysis and enrollment projections that the district recently had prepared. Back in the fall of 2020, the board was made aware that we would be looking at the district's ability to house its current and upcoming population. Since that time, we employed the company Ralph Campbell to do enrollment projections for the district, and these enrollment projections were prepared through 29/30. Through that year, as well as we've also had the capacity analysis prepared. Now, to my knowledge, I have been unable to find enrollment projections that were previously prepared for this district, but I'm sure Wells would probably be aware of the last time we had enrollment projections done, but I cannot find any historical to tell you since that time we have had another enrollment projection prepared. So along with the enrollment projections, if we can go to the next slide, what I've done is taken a look at our historical as well as our current enrollment, and the green line shows you the enrollment forecasted at a high rate. The yellow line is a moderate rate and the purple line is a lower rate than we would normally anticipate. Now, looking at our current enrollment and kind of doing our own projections, we do look like we're going to fall more in line with that moderate level as opposed to being low or high on the scale. So we use that moderate level to prepare our capacity analysis. And what that capacity analysis does is it says, based on our current board established guidelines, which were established a long time ago in terms of class size, how many students do we have and how many rooms do we therefore need based on those class sizes? So if we go to the next slide, the architects took a look at every room in our building and those rooms that could be utilized for educational purposes versus those rooms that cannot be used for educational purposes, and prepared this analysis for us. And basically what this analysis tells us is, number one, Washington is at or above capacity. And it's projected to remain that way. Now, the important thing to note is when looking at the capacity, their ability and what we're projecting for them to be over, we're only projecting roughly 25 students on average from year to year to year. So you're looking at on average one classroom for Washington. So, and that does include the use of our modular units. And so we do know that right now we're stretching our capacity at Washington and we need to be looking towards solutions in the future. This would be the first time that the board has received information that MG is now also nearing capacity. And what our architects have identified are the period of 5 different years where MG will either reach or exceed capacity. Again, it's important to look at the number of students. On average, those years are 15 students over capacity, again, on average. So now we're looking at a half a classroom or another classroom as it relates to MG. So we're looking at the district as a whole being out of capacity, 1 to 2 classrooms at either Washington or MG. Carl Sandburg, on the other hand, should be below its capacity levels. And that gives us the opportunity as administration to review this data in depth and to prepare more of a proactive approach to our capacity issues instead of a reactive approach, and really look at all of our options. Do we move a grade to Carl Sandburg? Do we build an addition onto MG? What approach do we want to take based on this information? So what we wanted to do tonight was to just make the board aware of the information that we were provided and let you know that administration will be taking an in-depth look at this information and coming back to the board with their plan for addressing these issues in the future. Any questions? Yes, sir.
So I asked, well, one, to the best of my knowledge, we have not done enrollment projections by going out and either doing live birth assessments or that type of thing, because the boundaries are such that trying to do that, we thought it would not be productive. Now, if we're the firm that we hired used what's the buildable land and, you know, what additional housing might be added, that's certainly one important factor. But the factor that we have really difficulty knowing is the turnover of existing housing stock and the number of students currently in the housing stock versus those that were in the housing stock at some other point in time. Because at some point in time, not only was the district had a student population of 1,700, but had a student population of higher 2,500 at one time. So the turnover in that existing housing stock is the key. And how the heck we can figure that out that's a challenge. Now, at Washington, according to the information that you provided back to us, in school year 19 and 20, we somehow or another accommodated, it says, 544 students.
Okay.
Above the guidelines and above the functional capacity.
We're saying 500 students above our functional capacity.
No, we provided, says enrollment was 544 students in 19 and 20. for Washington
Okay,
that school year. So we provided a program for more students than either the functional capacity or the capacity by schoolroom sizes that the architects have.
correct. And we're
So-
doing that currently. So, yep.
Yes, well, we're over, the current enrollment says 486. So we're over the quote functional capacity, but we're not over what we deem as guideline.
Well, this year, I can say that the analysis showed, and maybe I was looking at FY '22,
Okay,
that we are exceeding that. And we are also exceeding it in FY '21, so this year, by 29 students. So both years, and this is projected, they're using projected from Rolf Campbell that was prepared in the fall.
Yeah.
This is our actual enrollment as of right now. We're 29 above. So even from then till now, we are above not only the functional capacity by room size, but also the functional capacity by district guidelines right now. We are. And that's again, why we're trying to take a look at the information and make a plan of attack from here going forward, realizing especially at Washington, we're really maxing out our spatial capabilities there.
But I think, Wells, to your point, in that case that you just described, we're over by about a class size.
Yeah.
And then what we're able to do is manage that with the space that we have right now. And that's how we want to try to look at it. It's once we get past that point, we can't do that anymore.
and are we currently using a classroom space for music? And are we currently using a classroom space for art? I think the answer is yes to both. And when we had more students than what's currently there, we weren't. So again, before we talk about just one man's opinion, adding forever space somewhere, we've got to have some hard decisions about whether or not that is a better route to go.
Agreed.
If I could also make a point that I know that right now we're using a classroom at Washington as the nursing office now because we had to provide extra space for COVID guidelines. I don't know if the plan in the future is to, move that back into what used to be the nursing station once we don't have to provide a separate COVID area, a quarantine area and such. And if we're not at that point using health aides and that. So that's also a classroom space, which might explain too why we're exceeding the current capacity there because we are taking up some other spaces with that. But like I know at Washington down the second grade hallway, I know when my 8th grader was in second grade, she was in one of those hallways that are not even being used as classrooms right now. I think they're like storage spaces. So, there are some options, to be considered when we get there, but it's still something we need to keep in mind because while we may be able to work with it for a couple of years, we may get to the point where we can't work with it, even with the spaces that we have. So it's information to have and keep in mind. So we're not having to make quick decisions at that point.
And in additional, it's not a total classroom, but I think we had a report that we're going to be removing the sensory activity, whatever it's called, equipment in the room. And so that room is not a classroom by any means. It is space for auxiliary special.
That's the SLRC, right?
Right. So just, it's a difficult decision to go to the voters or spend a significant amount of capital to build on permanent space.
Do you know anything about the point that Wells made about the consultant and looking at where addresses are and everything like that in the zip code?
I do know that the consultants looked at not only turnaround, but live births, and we did this in conjunction with District 73 as well as the high school. So we weren't just operating in our own, silo, for lack of a better term. So Other than that, they prepared a report and have given us their, I guess, tools that they used. I didn't go and look at LivePerson personally, so I can say that what we have used in the past is our own projections.
Right.
And my projections and our projections are falling right in line with their moderate projections. We're within about 35 students, give or take, of the moderate level at all times, on average.
So, and I think, Simon, not 73.
Oh, I apologize.
We'll forgive. Very closer, Nick. So in the homework method says, on average, we get about 80-90% of the students back that were in attendance the prior year, and there's usually some drop off. Now, but again, as that housing stock turns over, we think that would at some point, but not so far.
Correct. The other thing we utilize is historical 5-year averages for our incoming kindergarten class, which we know last year being all time. So again, I think our information coupled with the consultant information, they're mirroring each other enough for us to at least utilize that data to do our analysis of our functional capacity. Okay, thank you very much. I believe I have the next item on the agenda. So the next item on the agenda is the TRS supplemental plan, and that information as well as the attachments are being provided to the board more for informational purposes. This will be something that we will be coming to the board in March for approval. It is not something that necessarily the district is offering. This is being offered by TRS, but we are required to adopt the agreements that they've provided to us so that they can offer that then to our employees. It sounds a little convoluted, but we're having legal right now take a look at those documents, and we'll be coming to you with the approved documents for your adoption at the March board meeting. So again, informational. Any questions?
No questions, but I had a comment. I'm on an email blast that I get, and I just got one a few hours ago that said there's some discussion at whatever agency level about some of the concerns that have come in, and they're working those through about fiduciary response, all those nice legal things that you usually ask about these plans. So it looks like it's the kinks are being worked out after they got feedback. So.
I think they are. And I think the last item I have on the agenda would be the FY22 Transportation Agreement Amendment, and it should say FY21. Wait, yes, FY21. It would be this year's amendment to our agreement with the transportation company. This is coming to you as a follow-up to what we had adopted last fiscal year, which basically allows for us to pay the contractors in the guidelines that are offered by the state of Illinois in terms of our reimbursement rate, so that they basically can pay their workers even when they are not necessarily transporting our students. So basically the state of Illinois says we'll still reimburse you like we have in the past if you keep your transportation company on contract and you continue to pay them, even if they're not necessarily providing bus routes during remote learning. And so we're coming to you again with a similar agreement that we signed in the last fiscal year for this fiscal year. Any questions?
Just as a follow-up, I know that you discussed at the finance committee meeting that in part this is based on, like you were saying, trying to ensure that we keep businesses open so that they're still open to use for our benefit when we do need them, whether that's now for hybrid or next school year, which we hope to be a little more normal. But that part of the reason for the reimbursement rates in this agreement have to do with the payment rates within this agreement have to do with the reimbursement rates that we get back from the state, which explains why the special education amounts and buses are at 100% versus the smaller percentages for the other ones, correct?
Correct, and that's because Illinois reimburses the district at a higher percent, a much higher percent than it does for regular education routes.
Somebody, haven't a number of those students in person been coming and going anyway?
They have been coming and going, but not nearly the expenditures per month for these routes are about $8,000 right now, whereas they would normally be about $40,000 a month. So there is a significant difference. Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time. Let me put my mask on before I walk past everyone. Thank you very much.
Next item that we're going to go to is teaching and learning, and we're going to talk about the hybrid model. Before we do begin, I do want to clarify one of the items. Tonight, we're not coming before the board and asking for the board to approve the hybrid model. The reason we're not asking for approval, we believe it was within the guidelines that we had in place. We're still implementing the original hybrid plan. We're just extending the hours for that for our students to be able to be here. So that was within the context of what we were putting that hybrid plan together. And that's why tonight we wanted to be able to come before you and share how that would look with having the kids just being in the buildings a little bit longer and how we can still maintain and support the quality instruction for our students that are also on remote. To be able to do that is going to be Dan.
Good evening. Tonight, we're going to give you an update on our hybrid model and discuss our next steps for increasing in-person time for our students. So next slide, please. So first, just to give you an idea of our current enrollment, about 50-50 split between the two programs. There's room for growth even within that program for our in-person students. Next slide. So we're also going to look at our attendance rate, how that's been going I've given you two schools, but do know that it's similar across the district. So next slide. So first looking at Carl Sandburg, we have about a 92% attendance rate for our hybrid and then a 96% for our remote instruction. This is great. We love having our students in front of us, whether it's in person or whether it's remote. Next slide. Mechanics Grove is very similar to Washington, which again is why I've given you just the Mechanics Grove graph. 97% attendance rate. Our students are doing great. And parents, we thank you for all of the work that you've done, making sure that your students are in front of our teachers so that they can do their thing. Next slide. The work of the MIA and the admin since the beginning has been a weekly one. It's been, for the most part, very positive. One of the outcomes was a tool that we've used to measure our mitigations efficacy through walkthroughs. So we're going to share a little bit of that data as we work together. So next slide. First one is about social distancing. So again, either a teacher or administrator or leader in the building would be walking around the building at different times during the day. We've used this for about 4 days, since we've had 4 days of hybrid instruction over the last 2 weeks, actually 3 days of hybrid instruction over the last 2 weeks. This will give you an idea of the social distancing, 1 being there's no social distancing at all, 5 being very good social distancing, that we're maintaining our social distance. There is a place in the rubric, in the tool, for comments. So when we look at the comments for this part of the tool, we notice that where we can see improvement on those 3s and 4s is during dismissal. That dismissal time is not something that should inhibit us from going to longer days in person, because we're still going to dismiss only once a day. We've already put some things in place at the buildings to make sure that dismissal is smooth or smoother, and we're maintaining our social distance. So kudos to everybody involved at the school level and the students as well. Next slide, please. The second mitigation that we look at as a team is looking at whether staff and students are wearing their masks. I think the graph speaks for itself, that when we're in classrooms, when we're in the hallways, when we're in the common spaces, that children and staff are wearing their masks and wearing their masks appropriately. And so again, kudos for everybody for doing their part with the mitigations. Next slide. So that takes us to kind of next steps, right? We have strong mitigations that are helping us stay healthy. We can see that our health is stable because we have really high attendance rates. So we want to take a look at what next steps are. And so we're going to kind of work backwards from the 8th and the 15th, and then take us back all the way to the board presentation. So first we're going to look at March 8th and 15th. So next, or actually don't go to the next slide yet. On March 8th, Carl Sandburg will be starting full days in person. So what does that mean for our families? Students who are currently enrolled in hybrid will start either Monday, Thursday, or Tuesday, Friday in person for the full day. That's if they're currently enrolled. Our special ed self-contained will be in person for 4.5 of those days, all 4.5 of those days. Then on March 15th, that's when we'll welcome back Washington and MG students who've chose to enroll in the hybrid, as well as any Carl Sandburg students who have chosen to move from remote to hybrid over the next couple of days, as we've given that option to families. Again, self-contained at all of our buildings will be 4.5 days. The reason we're doing this sort of phased in is to give us some time. We need to make sure buses are available, that bus routes are ready, schedules are ready, making sure that our capacity is, and we're doing all of the mitigations, and everything else that we need to have a safe running of the school building during the day. So let me give you a little bit of an example of what those days could look like. If you'll go to the next slide, please. So this will give you an idea of what Washington and Mechanics Grove will look like. For the most part, we're largely going back to the schedules that you're kind of used to pre-COVID, right? Because we're going to be there full days. So during, if children choose hybrid, or sorry, families choose hybrid, they'll be in person on Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays for full days at MG and Washington. Obviously, this is space permitting. We have to continually monitor what our capacity is in each of the classrooms, and we're making sure that we can, to the best of our ability, welcome back any families that would like to be in this model. Again, just a reminder, our special ed self-contained will be here on Wednesday mornings at Washington and MG, and then we'll go home for a remote afternoon. Everybody else who's not in self-contained will have a remote day on Wednesdays. This will allow for a deeper clean in our buildings. Next slide, please. At Sandburg, very little change outside of just moving to the full day. While at Washington and MG, we can welcome back all of the students who've chosen hybrid for 4 days. At Carl Sandburg, it's a 2-day model, just like we've been doing, except they'll be there for the full day. So students who are A through K will come Mondays and Thursdays, L through Z will come on Tuesdays and Fridays. Remote will be Wednesday for everybody. Again, our special ed self-contained will come on the mornings of Wednesday and then go home for a remote afternoon. Next slide, please. So we talked about making sure that always that our teachers are supported along the way. And as we move back in our timeline, you see that we're asking to put a remote planning day for our teachers. Why do we need that remote planning day? We are changing our model of instruction at the Washington and Mechanics Grove to a concurrent instructional model. And a concurrent instructional model is where the remote learners and the in-person learners are going to learn simultaneously. We know that that has its challenges, but we also know that as we move forward through the year, more and more is written and researched about concurrent education. Just on February 11th, so what is that? 12 days ago, there was an article on ASCD that's really informed a lot of our professional learning and models that we can use to help support learners in both areas, whether they're in person and remote. So I want to take you through some of the things that we're going to be doing with our K through 5 teachers. And these are the same things in a shorter amount of time that our middle school teachers have been working on over the last couple of months as they prepared for concurrent instruction. Concurrent instruction at the middle school has been largely very successful. So if you go to the next slide. So really I've broken this into 2 categories, instructional techniques and instructional tools. And we're going to focus on the instructional techniques because the instructional tools are something that if you are at home with your children, you've probably seen some of these tools, but we want to highlight those and how important they are in a concurrent instructional model. So in instructional techniques, you see 4 different things here. And I want to just kind of go through it. in the upper left-hand corner, you see a station model. Our teachers are very versed in running stations. It looks different in a remote and in-person landscape. And so we want to make sure that we're providing professional learning so that teachers know how to plan and make sure that their stations maybe include a remote station where they're going to meet with their remote learners. This one we've aptly named Flip-Flop. Flip-Flop is sort of another one that's sort of like stations, but where teachers strategically will move from working with their in-person students while their remote students work independently, and then flip-flopping and do the remote students while the in-person students work independently. Both of these can be supported by making sure we're strategically putting staff in the right places. We're looking at utilizing our intervention staff, our special ed staff, our reading staff, our paras, in making sure that we're pushing them into classrooms so that they can support teachers and students so that both our in-person and our remote students feel supported. This right here, I asked Patience, one of our instructional coaches, give me something for flipped classroom. What is a flipped classroom? What could I use? So a flipped classroom basically is where the lecture is a video and can be watched independently. What does that allow you to do? When the students watch the video independently, the teacher can focus on the problem solving and applications with students in small groups. So they could be working with their remote group and working with their in-person group separately. And then lastly, what we've created at the middle school is sort of a pathway for lesson planning, right? How do you plan your lessons so that you have the most success with your students in both arenas? And it starts with a soft start or an opener, sort of like a checking in with your students, moving into whole group, and then taking that whole group time and try to condense that into a mini lesson, 10 minutes, so that you can get to independent work and group work. Again, going back to the stations and the flip-flop, and then always bringing that group together because community is so important in a classroom, bringing those two groups together and having some sort of wrap-up. We need to support these instructional shifts with our teachers, and that's what we're gonna be doing on this remote planning day at our K2 building and our 3-5 building, and trying to work with our instructional coaches, the principals, the assistant principals, and doing that. After you kind of understand some of those, from a 30,000 foot, what do those instructional techniques look? This is how we're going to do it, right? What's really important when we talk about the instructional tools is these are not new tools. These are tools that we want to refocus our attention on, because they're collaborative tools and they allow us to give feedback to students in real time. Pear Deck is probably the newest of the tools. So just to give you an idea, it's an add-on, I think. I'm probably getting my stuff wrong, so Conrad, I'm sorry. But Pear Deck is basically a add-on that teachers can use with their Google Slideshows that makes Google Slides interactive for the students. And they can put a poll up and test kind of dipstick, right? Test how the students are doing both in person and remote at the same time. Students can interact and drag and drop things on the screen, again, both in person and remote at the same time. Many people are versed with Seesaw and have seen that. I call it kind of the Facebook of education. Google Docs, this is something that, or Google Drive is something that we've been using. Zoom, obviously, our most important tool for this. Padlet, sort of think of a virtual corkboard where students can collaborate. Again, both the in-person students and the remote. And then Jamboard, sort of the same thing. Also a newer tool for our teachers. But Jamboard is sort of a little bit easier, stripped down version of Padlet, and can do things like that where you could put Post-its up or have kids moving things back and forth, drag and drop as they go. So we're gonna take over our remote planning day, take time to talk about instructional techniques, take time to revisit our tools, and then I think the most important thing is to allow our staff to practice. Staff, we're gonna have a checklist. So they're gonna have to identify where in the room can I walk and still be seen on the screen? Where in the room can I walk and still be heard by my students? So we've created some scenarios for our teachers so they can practice those things in the classroom, and we've given them some fun tape to mark their classroom up so they know when I walk over here, I'm sort of in that dead zone where nobody can hear me, nobody can see me, but when I walk over here, then I can be seen and heard. Likewise, we want to give them practice on these instructional models. We want to see them working in teacher groups, practicing going from group to group and making sure that they're hitting on seeing their remote students in the class. Those are the things that we're going to be doing over the course of that 24-hour, that 6-hour day. And then we're going to be following it up. We've already got sessions scheduled for after spring break at our buildings to follow up, get us through that first, what's working, what's not, reflect on that, and then what are the next steps? I know that one thing that patients would say to the teachers, again, one of our instructional coaches, is that first week, don't do anything new. Just try to do what you do, but do with it with the knowledge that you have kids both in front of you and at home. So next slide, please. So that gives you an idea of March 4th. I just want to kind of talk briefly about the 24th through the 4th. Tomorrow we'll be sending out information to our families to give them information on these new schedules and to give families an opportunity to change either from remote to hybrid or hybrid to remote if that's not what they're looking to do right now. We're asking that all of that information, that any of those change requests be filled out to the form, which is online, by March 4th at 3 p.m. And that gives us sort of Friday and then Monday to kind of work through all of those changes that people are requesting. Confirmation emails will follow the next week, and that includes what bus routes it'll be and making sure that everybody is ready for the March 15th start date. And so with that,
Principal meetings,
sorry.
principal dates with the principals when they might be shared.
Oh, yes, I do have that. So last thing. So we're going to have a couple of Q&A sessions. Put it on my notes on the wrong sheet. So we'll have a couple of Q&A sessions. Washington, and more information will be coming out on this. Washington will be on Sunday, the 28th, from 2 to 3 and from 3 to 4. Mechanics Grove will have an informational on Monday, March 1st, from 5 to 6. And Carl Sandburg will have an informational on Monday from 6:30 to 7:30. All will be recorded, so if you can't make one of those dates, we will make sure that it is on the website, likewise with the questions answered. So with that, I will move to questions. Yes.
So are those, I'm presuming then they're intended for parents to help them navigate things?
Yes, if they have questions, yes.
And so well, you probably know. So if we went to the various software pieces,
okay,
approximately how many different times during whatever period of time you want to think about does a student need to migrate from one software functionality to a different one?
So it's going to depend on the age of the child. Our teachers are very adept to knowing what students can handle. And whenever they move from one software piece or app to another or toggle between them, they're making sure that students are supported and they have the amount of time. Some of the things for the younger students can happen through Seesaw. The older students can happen through Google Classroom. And then we also work with our tech department because we can push bookmarks onto the browser for them. We also have other pieces of software that some of our teachers use where they can actually push a website out. We're actually working with second grade to be using that a little bit more as we roll that out.
Okay.
How is lunch being handled now that full days?
Sure. So at Washington, they're going to be using both of their gymnasium areas, making sure it's social distance, 30-minute increments. At MG, they're going to use the extra gym, so the small gym where they typically would have lunch, but also use additional classrooms. Sandberg is utilizing all of their space, which is the multipurpose room, the south gym, and I think they might even be using the library, right? No. Just those two? Okay, just those two. We've had lots of different conversations of this. So, yes, so 30-minute increments, socially distanced. Obviously, you can't eat with your mask on. I've tried. You forget it's on. But social distance, and then make sure that there's adequate time to clean in between.
So there's every 30-minute increments, is everyone eats lunch at the same time, or are there different shifts?
Different lunch shifts.
Okay.
If I can clarify on that, because I spent some time today talking with Mrs. Drake, because I had a lot of questions on how this was going to work in the Washington, and MG, but Washington especially. I know that before there had been a lot of discussion about how the concurrent learning model was not something we were considering using for the K through 5 when we were doing the previous models. So I had a lot of questions when told that now we were going to go to this. How is that changing? So she was able to answer a lot of the questions, a lot of the things they're working through, but she did answer for me a lot of the lunch questions too. At Washington, they're probably going to have 6 different shifts of lunch so that they can accommodate the social distancing with keeping the kids 6 feet apart at tables, zigzagged and staggered so that they're not interacting, less than 6 feet. I know when I toured MG today, Sandberg today, they had it all set up as they do in the multi-purpose room where they've got the desks spread out. It looked to me wider than 6 feet in all directions. And they'll have basically assigned seating like they do for the buses because they have assigned seating on the buses and they go in for check-in in the mornings in these spots. So there'll be names on the desks to tell them where they're supposed to be sitting for their lunches. So there'll be a 6th grade lunch, a 7th grade lunch, and an 8th grade lunch. Each desk will have the assigned kid's name on the label that's on there so that they will be maintaining that distance and able to more effectively clean. And they will be doing cold lunch instead of a hot lunch for box lunches at all the schools so that they can help with the service of that. It wasn't really explained to me and I wasn't clear whether or not those have to be pre-ordered, they'll be offered, and how that'll work. But I imagine those logistics will come out as time. Do you know if it's going to be like it was before with, kids can either bring their own lunch or they can, at attendance in the morning say that they want to get a lunch, or how does that work?
I don't, but we will make sure that gets answered for you. And then
Okay.
principal session. And if I could add to what you were saying about, we've talked about not wanting to move in the direction of concurrent 5 students. Yes, we understand it has its challenges. Like I had mentioned, more and more people are writing about successes with the concurrent model. We had to make some tough, difficult decisions. We had in front of us concurrent model, changing teachers, getting rid of maybe some of our interventions for some of our students who are struggling the most. And we had to make a difficult decision to move in that direction instead of changing teachers or getting rid of interventions. And I think what also helps is Carl Sandburg's had some success with it already. And we can leverage that success. And we've already talked about having some of the teachers from Sandburg working with our MG teachers to talk about what's been working. What have I learned so that you don't fall into the same, holes that I have? And one of those things was making sure that we have time to practice and time to mark off our classroom so that I know and feel confident about what that space is going to look like.
And I know that it's a work in progress. I am concerned, as the parent of a remote 1st grader, I am concerned about the ability to maintain attention span in a concurrent learning model, but also now having lived the Tuesdays and Thursdays from a remote perspective, most days it's working fine, but there's a lot more time spent on epic reading or taking breaks because he's already gotten through all the work or what have you. So I can see how this could be beneficial by having more structured time, like with teachers, even if it's 4 full days, I could see that there being some less just asynchronous downtime. Not that there won't be any, but it'll be, I can see how there could be positives. I am a little concerned as the remote learners though. This is going to virtually require them to be on screen for the full 5-hour clock day or whatever, where before the goal had been of the 5-hour clock day, about 2.5 hours and sitting in front of the screen. This is basically going to tie these remote learners to being on screen. But, you know, I could see some positives with that, seeing how sometimes my kid goes off of, you know, YouTube or whatever when he's left to his own devices. So having more structured small group time, I think could be beneficial. I know that there's still planning going on about what's going to happen on the remote Wednesdays for Washington and MG. And I would just like to, I know that the staff and Mrs. Drake are very concerned about trying to maintain the relationships between the kids and their teachers, because that's what I see missing for remote students in this model, because they're not going to have the face-to-face. Right now, they had Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, they had half their class with the screen in front of the teacher. Now the kids in person are going to have, you know, those 4 days with the teachers, and the kids at home aren't really going to have a dedicated teacher time. I would encourage, you know, as much as we can to maybe allow kind of as a concession, you know, having more of the focus be on the remote kids on the Wednesday remote time with the teachers, rather than so much on the high, you know, because we are doing this to help the kids and families who want to be in person, because that's, you know, I think we all agree that in person is best if you're comfortable with that, doing that. But I would encourage, you know, trying to do whatever we can to maintain some of that teacher time, because you know, I am concerned about the remote learners in this model, but, you know, I'm still keeping mine remote because that's the decision we've made. But, you know, that's just one of the things that I wanted to, but I was encouraged by Mrs. Drake also mentioned that the Chromebooks will be encouraged, or they will be asking to have all of the kids who are in person bringing their Chromebooks with them, so that they can, as a class, utilize some of these Jamboard and Pear Deck interactive tools, so that the kids at home are still able to interact with the kids in person, rather than just being a screen, you know, a face on the screen on the big screen like I am now in the boardroom. Because in this setting, you know, you guys can see me, but I really can't see much of you. And that's what is going to be faced with the kids who are at home. They're not going to see as many of the kids back and forth without having that dedicated time.
So before we sort of say that students at home in a remote setting won't have as much, can we go back to this slide? And I just want to talk through these two one more time, because I think we have to think about it as, yes, in our current model, on Tuesdays and Thursdays, there's a dedicated block of time, and it's a large chunk of time. But in both of these models are FaceTime for our teachers with our students at home. And so maybe what we're hoping is the combined, you know, bits of those times will be very supportive for our learners at home, just like they're going to be very supportive for the learners in person. So I think we have to think about that block of time a little bit differently than we have it on Tuesdays and Thursdays currently. So I just want to make sure that that's very clear.
And I agree with that. And that's what I'm saying. I think that there's definitely room for a lot of progress to help all the students in this. I don't want it to be seen as though we're just helping the hybrid kids and not helping the in-person, because the remote, because I can see with my own kid, there are going to be some benefits. I think this also allows for more consistency in a schedule, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, rather than the constant switches that are happening now. And I think some of the switches that are happening now had to do with some training that some of the teachers had to do. So we were told, you know, hey, there's an asynchronous day. Tomorrow they're doing reading assessments, so it's an asynchronous day. So there are a lot of changes. I can see this being beneficial, you know, to trying to do, because I know previously we had talked about having one model until spring break and then another model till the end of the year. I'm understanding that one of the reasons we're doing this is to try to have one change and have it persist through the rest of the year. Is that accurate?
Correct. We're making this change to, you know, if we've learned anything in COVID, it's to be flexible. So our goal is to make this the last change.
Okay.
Runs, you know, the data, you know, that we always have to be mindful of that too. So.
And that doesn't mean there won't still be tweaks, because again, as we all live this and do this, there may be better ways to do it. And none of us have done this exactly before. So I can understand that. And I do hope that, you know, families will take a deep breath and try to be patient, because we're all going through it together as parents too. But I can see some benefits. And I know, you know, like with some of the parent comments tonight, the constant changes are not only hard on families, but they're hard on the kids. So we're trying to get to a point, and I understand that that's part of the changes that we're making now, are to try to minimize how many more times we are changing this. And I can appreciate that. There's also what hasn't been discussed. There will be a snack time then instituted, because at the school, at Washington and MG, because of the varied lunch times that there might be, there's going to be a snack period, correct?
Yes, and I think they've always had a snack period. Obviously, it comes with different challenges, but our teachers, I know our principals are going to make sure that it's very safe for our students.
Okay. With how are specials like PE and art and music going to go? Because that's been one benefit of the last couple of weeks, is we've had increased art and music time with the kids, but how is that going to work in the concurrent model?
We'll go back to that pre-COVID sort of idea of, I think it's PE 4 or 5 days a week, art 1 or 2 days a week, depending on the school, and music 1 or 2 days a week, and then library. So I believe it's going back to what we would typically know for our school.
So is that going to be like each class is going to have their own specials time, and that'll be built in, and the remote kids will do, is it going to be more asynchronous then, or is it going to be more face-to-face like it has been?
It'll be concurrent as well. Our PE teachers, our music teachers, our art teachers will have time to talk, and have been talking about what a concurrent PE class will look like, right? We know that if students are in person and hitting the tennis ball against the wall, that's not going to look the same for the student at home, because my guess, Christy, you don't want your son hitting the tennis ball against the wall inside. So we're going to have to be creative in thinking about what specials look like. But, you know, if we're in PE, we're going to make sure the kids are being physical.
Okay. And how is lunch going to work for the remote kids? Are they going to take their lunch time at the same 30 minutes that their concurrent class in person is taking it, or how is that going to work?
Yes.
Okay.
Obviously, you know, when you're at home, you can eat in front of the screen. We hope that they don't, because we want them to take in class. So, you know, the goal would be to take lunch at the same time.
Right, but it won't be an hour and a half or whatever like we've had. It'll be a shorter time, but at a dedicated time. Okay.
But I believe, sorry, Jamie, I just want to make sure I get this right. Lunches are pickup once or twice a week. Wednesdays out in the community picking up lunch, which is our remote day. And they get a week's worth of lunch during that pickup. So we had that at the beginning of the year because we weren't giving a week at a time, and we needed to make sure there was adequate time to get lunches for kids. Now we have that once a week pickup. So thank you, Jamie, for doing that.
How will, I did notice that, I'm sorry, because I can't tell when anyone else is talking, so I'll just keep talking until someone tells me to shut up. How will busing be affected by these changes? Because one thing I do notice, which I think is a better idea than what happened this last time, is I do notice that the schedules are back to being staggered, with Carl Sandburg starting at 7:45 like they are now. MG will start at 8 until 2, and then Washington from 8:30 to 2:30. So they'll be staggered starting and ending times, correct?
So I'm going to have T talk about the bus.
Yes, you are correct. And we have verified with Lakeside that they can accommodate our start and end times. And we'll also be able to accommodate the high school start and end times, because obviously this is all intertwined. Our schedules affect the high school and vice versa. The other thing that we did was we planned for every student to be on all of the buses. So if we have a situation where a parent decides they want their child to attend in person, whereas previously they told us they did not, that there would be spot on that bus for that child. And what this does for us, realizing that only half of these children are more than likely going to ride the bus, is it then provides plenty of social distancing for those students on that bus. So I hope that answers your questions.
Thank you, T. Wells, I think you had a question?
Well, I have one corollary potentially to that. Oh, and there was a question about, the half day, if you will, is working okay for students or whatever. Was there any student will happen? And then, I mean, it wouldn't be, it's not, and then before all this happened, there were probably 3 lunch periods at Washington anyway. So now we're just expanded it because we need some more time to have more social distancing. So that doesn't seem unique to me. And would it normally be the case, much like if you were in a regular classroom, where I thought, and it could be totally wrong because I'm not an educator, that I might have provided the lesson and I might have had one group go off and do small group work, and I might have had another group go off and do other work. And so during that time, I can divide my time between one part of that time I'm going to be addressing primarily the in-persons that are there. And then when they're busy doing what they're doing, I'm going to attend to the persons that are remote.
Wells, you can write an ASCD article tomorrow.
Sounds like a flip-flop to me, Wells. There you go.
Basically,
All right.
what you're talking about is the station teaching. So yeah, I mean, you're ready. I'm going to write it with you, Wells.
And I'm probably
ASCD,
the only
here we
one other
come.
than the educators in the room to know what ASCD stands for. That's okay.
You're going to put me on the spot.
Dan, I have to ask, we've gotten so much feedback since we've started back to school, and I would have to say 3/4 of it has been from first grade. We've heard the words first grade. We've heard more comments tonight. What are we doing specifically to help the little ones in our district?
So, one thing that Mrs. Drake is talking about doing is partnering 2 classrooms with a specialist. So again, at specific times in the day, those 3 teachers sort of work together, whether they're doing one of these station methods or whether they're doing the flip-flop to have an extra teacher in the classroom, so that we can provide that in-time feedback to students, remote and in person simultaneously. Those are the things that we're looking at and being creative with our staff. And we'll continue to we'll continue to do other things like that.
Content or just being able to go from one technology type to
I think technology is a big part of
yeah,
this.
again,
especially
my
for the kids
kindergarten,
at home.
invariably something goes kapooey. And if my wife wasn't there or some other adult wasn't there, it would be very difficult for a 6-year-old, whatever, to, say, oh, well, wait a minute, I got to reboot. That happens. And sometimes you just got to say, I think it seems like it's that more than it is.
Yeah, I mean,
teaching content.
Right.
Our teachers have been, I think, very responsive to parents in helping both with technology and with content. They've sort of had to play that dual role. And so those are just, making sure staff is available. I think somebody had mentioned today, they couldn't make the materials pickup, and so we're making time outside of that. Or I would even say I know our parent coordinator, Jorge Moncada, he's been delivering supplies and delivering lunches. So we're really working with families when they contact us. and say, I'm having a problem. And so we need to keep those lines of communication open.
When we get the information out to families, I know that we're still planning to, I presume, do our half days, scheduled half days for professional development for the rest of the year. So can we get an idea so that parents can plan what those half day times will look like on these new schedules? Because we won't automatically know that. And a lot of parents like me have to plan ahead and put it in calendars. So that's just a request and a question.
When you say half day times, are you talking about our professional development half days?
Yes. Like what time then will school start and end at each building under the new schedule?
So there won't be any change for our March 12th because
Okay.
Actually, will there be a change at Stanford? I'll have to check. I don't know if there's going to be a change at Sandberg, but I don't anticipate there being a change at Sandberg because really no change to the schedule has happened over there. But we'll make sure April and May's half days are completely communicated out.
Whatever they're going to be, just have that, I guess, be decided and put in the parent communications so that people know what happens on March 12th, because I know with all of the changes, a lot of the feedback and the pushback from the community is when we get, you know, and I know some of these things can't be planned in advance. When we had the big snow last week and everybody said, okay, everybody follow your Tuesday schedule, but it's all remote. Well, no one really knew what that meant because the kids that usually go to school on Tuesdays didn't have a remote schedule. And so everyone was just confused by that. So I'm just trying to think ahead for what, you know, since we're not going to know what a half day schedule looks like, since this is a new schedule, just if we could make a decision among the buildings, what those times are going to look like. So parents can have that and not, you know, find out the day before, the week of, oh, I didn't realize it was a half day. What time does my kid get out? And just to plan ahead.
I will make sure the principals put that in their weekly updates to parents. Since our communication about the change in our hybrid plan is sort of ready to go already. So I don't want to cloud that communication, but I'll make sure that our principals are putting that in their weekly update. Thank you.
So Dan, quick follow-up. So there is no change on the half day at Sandberg. There'll still be 7:45 to 11. Earlier question in regards to lunch. Answer is yes, lunch count will be done in the morning, and yes, students may bring their own lunch.
Thank you.
So I'm not sure if this is regarding this, but are we committed to, if and when there is a reported case, and whether it be a student or an adult, we will provide that information on the website and how many there are?
Shane?
Sorry, I didn't mean to jump out of
Okay.
So.
Question about, okay.
So at this time, I'm tracking that data internally. And the nurses are tracking it by each building. We haven't posted it on the website yet because we're wanting to format that. But yes, that is something that we already have and can very easily make that information public.
So
when will it go public?
Yeah.
It was gonna go public last week, then the CDC changed their number of days they wanted us to look at it. So we're meeting with the group. They went from 14 days of following the trend to 7.
Well, no, I think I'm asking a different question.
No, but you're asking
Okay.
about posting our information on the website. So we should hopefully have that posted up at the end of the week, beginning of next week.
No, I just, the number of cases that in District 75. Oh, okay, sorry. There is a 7-day, whatever, it's just, you know.
Or like a rolling.
Yeah, until we have enough data points to have a rolling number.
Correct.
Okay, all right.
Thank you, Shane. Okay, thank you very much.
Good evening. I have 2 items that I hope you will find refreshingly simple.
We'll make them hard.
Okay. At a previous board meeting, the board approved the creation and hire of 3 school health aide positions. For your review and approval is the job description for those positions. This is largely informational. The job description has been available the entire time. It was just intentionally delayed to this board meeting, hoping that there would be less on your plate in terms of reviewing it.
So much for that.
Yeah, exactly. We tried. But your approval is a important compliance function to have this then be in the job description library. The last piece is just a friendly reminder that with a new year, there is a new Department of Children and Family Services mandated reporter form that is in your manila folder. If you'd be so kind as to sign that and date that, I can then collect those later and have that within my compliance folder. Christy, I can get that from you at your convenience.
Okay. If I need to stop by the office, I can do that too.
Thank you.
Up next, superintendent's report. Anna, if you please pull up the calendars. So bringing back to the board the calendars, we did have the calendar committee meet, which does have representation from every building. We did have some administrators on there as well. The 21-22 calendar was almost done last year, and then we went into the pandemic. So the calendar committee met back, refreshed what we were doing in that, and in that calendar, we do make sure that we align with the area school districts. We also align with District 120 as well. Key components of where the alignment does exist is on the start date with 120, it's close, and then the winter and spring breaks are also consistent with the surrounding school districts. The format for us is consistent with what was the anticipated calendar for this year in regards to the different dates, whether it's professional development, parent conferences, and institute days. So we've done a very similar calendar for that. The key part's really on the yellow days that you see on the Fridays, which are half days. The intentions are for half day professional development, vertical articulations to take place between teachers, whether it's Washington with Sandburg or MG, or even with the high school. We have designated a couple of those days to where we know both 75 and 120 are on half days so that they do have opportunities to meet. We do still need to place, you'll notice down at the bottom, May and June, weather emergency days. We still do need to do those. But since we will be looking, we have a remote plan right now, we might still be able to have remote days if weather would come in place like we experienced just a couple of weeks ago. But those are still in there until anything happens differently, because right now we anticipate those staying because there are some school districts that do not have that ability to provide remote lessons for weather-related events. In the calendar itself, we do still observe one of the Jewish holidays and Good Friday. Outside of that, it's pretty consistent.
I'm going to make my typical request that I made last year. This format, and I know I said it in the questions ahead of time, it's really, I don't know of any other calendar that reads like this, with Saturday and Sunday being on the far two left or right-hand columns. And I know for me, when I'm going through my personal calendar and diarying all these dates, I have had to consciously think about it. And I know virtually every half day, institute day, day off, and whatever that comes up, there's invariably a number of Facebook posts and stuff where people didn't realize it was off, or they thought it was on a Thursday versus a Friday because people read this difficult. So I am making a request that we not use this template next year because it's really hard to read. But that's one opinion of 7.
So we will look at some different models for it. We'll definitely have heard you. So do thank you for bringing it back up. And if you'd show the next calendar, 22, 23. It is in the same format, a little bit different in two areas, meaning it's one of those years where the start date, we've been typically starting the second week in August, going into the 22, 23 school year. The start date is getting moved down into the third week of August. When you then start looking at the winter and spring breaks, due to the timing and trying to make sure we're coordinating with other school districts, the winter break does start later. And it also goes after the beginning of the new year, where we are usually starting right after the new year. And those are really the two biggest differences from what we've seen in calendars. One of the things the committee did want to do to try to balance things out, you'll notice we put in a weather emergency day on the 22nd. So if we needed to call school prior to the 22nd, we'd be able to use that day to have students in before going on break. We've done that before a few years ago with President's Day. If it's needed, we try to use it. We need to communicate with our parents, making sure they remember that. So it's 2 years out, so not scheduling vacations yet, but just so people do know that. If it's not used, it's counted as one of the emergency days that we have on hand. Again, 2 years from now, that might be a remote day for us instead of calling it a weather emergency day. But that was the thinking that went behind it. And one of the things the committee did want to do, because this is still 2 years out, again, next year, we'll just touch base again and make sure everything that we have identified as the dates will stay consistent. And if there were any changes, we would bring that back to you as a board for your approval.
Why did we decide to use 12/23 as the weather emergency day rather than say President's Day or something? Because I mean, some people do make 3-day weekend plans in advance, but those are usually easier to change than holiday plan, so I can just foresee if we have an emergency day where we say, oh, we're going to have school on this day, you're going to have a lot of people just not show up, especially since it's so close to Christmas. That just seems ill-timed to me for a weather emergency day rather than another day. But I don't know if anyone else shares that opinion.
I agree.
So again, we're continuing to go over these, and if we did any changes, we can bring those back. I'll bring back the comments that you have in regards to the 23rd for the committee.
What's the overarching reason for starting a week later than usual?
It's just the way it worked out, timing-wise, to be able to do stuff. More people are starting to try to go a little bit later. We're getting to the point where we're starting almost the beginning of the second week in August. So I'm trying to push it back down a little bit. It's a cycle of, I don't know why, Kevin. It seems like every so many years it gets pushed back.
Yeah.
So you mentioned other districts are pushing it later, because you mentioned
Yeah.
coordinating, so it's kind of a group effort, so to speak.
Yeah.
Does Lake County still do that, like Lake County calendar? Like all the school districts, you tend to follow. Regional office, I guess, does that.
They do that. We typically, the Lake County Superintendent's Group, usually we just all talk with one another.
So, I'll play dumb. So will either District 75 and or the high school's grading period? So I assume that then it ends before the winter break, right?
I don't you scroll up. I don't know if the grading period ends at that time, but the first trimester ends on November 4th and the second one, February 17th.
Okay, so you got a big, so I guess again, at one point in time when you'd have almost everything done and then you'd go on winter break and then take finals, and that was just not very productive in my opinion. So all right, so that's still there. So then, and I thought possibly moving the date to start a little earlier was in part to get a few more days of instruction in before everybody had to take the standardized test that the state came out and said you had to do in April. Okay. And yeah, I mean, I think the 23rd, unless you're gonna declare it right now, that the only way it's gonna happen is a remote learning day. I mean, and you also have, I think, sort of things to think about and consequences for staff as well, because they can't take personal days on it.
Because, I mean, using your example, Wells, that would mean that staff can't, you know, if they were planning to fly out of town, they really couldn't leave until the 24th, just in case we have an emergency day. So I would just prefer having that be, if it's going to be a no attendance day, let's just make it a no attendance day, even if that means we make another day an emergency day later on. But that's just my preference. I know we're voting on it later, so.
Well, are we voting on both years?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, separately. They're separate line items.
So I'll take the 23rd of December in regards to the 22-23 back to the committee when they meet. Okay. Next item that we have then is the vision statement. If you pull that up, please. So I'll give a brief overview, and then any of the board members that participated in the last meeting, give the floor to you, please, to share what you'd like with the board in regards to the vision statement. So when we entered into shared services, one of the things that the group had agreed to was creating a common vision statement for both districts. This process did begin last year. We had worked up until February and then had taken a break for about 9 months, and then were able to come back together. Last February, we had done a lot of the work already. At the last meeting, the group came together and agreed upon a vision statement that, based off the traits that we'd like to see our students acquire as they walk through from one building to the next, and then ultimately once they walk across the graduation stage. So the vision statement itself is really based off a keyword of aspire. And aspire lists a different number of traits that we'd like all of our students to be able to do or experience or demonstrate as they go through their developmental years through our school systems. One of the things that's going to happen here from an administrative side for everybody, so this becomes a living working document, is I will be working with our administrative team. I've asked them, we're going to start this tomorrow, to take each one of those traits, agile, self-assured, proactive, information-seeking, resilient, and empathetic, take that and put it in a booklet and base it off of either by grade level, department, or activity, and be able to describe what does that look like, sound like, and feel like. So that means they'll actually have our staff working together saying, how are we already doing this in our buildings? Because we are, but now it's doing it with intent so that we know that it's taking place. And what I'm asking them to do is to have that document done by the end of June. And then that way we'll be able to have the items that we want to be able to monitor so that we can be reflective as educators and work with our students and how we are putting our vision statement as a district forward. And we'd be able to bring that back to you as a board. And this would probably be a joint meeting every year so that you'd be able to see how this was taking place in our buildings. Any board members that participated in the process would like to share anything in regards to the process or anything about the development?
I'm glad it's done, because 9 months was a long time. I guess the last meeting that we did, we really, we've had that statement at the top there for a while, and we've had the portrait of a learner. The portrait of a learner document was much longer and a little bit more in depth. And we really spent time in our last meeting really sort of paring down the portrait of a learner document and really made it sort of come together with the Aspire thing. It was like sort of a lot of wordsmithing and figuring out which parts we wanted to keep, which parts we wanted to delete. And I felt a little bad because I felt like we deleted a ton of stuff that was part of Portrait of a Learner, but I really like the fact that we have this one pager now that really has the statement and then Portrait of a Learner. And I love what you were just talking about people taking that and going and seeing how we're already meeting some of these Portrait of a Learner words already. We did the same thing at Libertyville when we got our thing like this. We were like, oh man, we already do this, we already do that. And it was so easy to come up with examples and everything. So I think that's a really going to be a really good exercise for the staff to do that. I'm excited about that.
And then to draft off of what Kevin said, the reason I think that the verbiage on the Portrait of a Learner got overhauled is because right before COVID, we had 2 community sessions that were very productive. Well, community, and the one was mostly the educational community, so people from both districts came and the public could come. But then the second one was really community emphasis. There was a community emphasis. Invitations were sent out to a broad spectrum of people. And it kind of knocked us out of our, we were so focused on what it meant to us that we forgot the fresh eyes kind of brought to light, some of the questions and so we could fine tune it. And yes, it was a major overhaul, but I think it got to the essence better, and it was words that were clearer and more concise, and more importantly, kids could understand, because a lot of it, I think, was words that adults would relate to, but you couldn't make it all encompassing the way it was. So this was a nice distillation of the concepts with clearer and hopefully directed language.
So she got all my adjectives, but clarity, I think, is the key.
I'd like to thank all of you for participating on this, and this will be coming back. Big stuff. Next topic is Press 106. This is the second and final reading. One of the follow-up items that was asked was in regards to School Board Policy 7300, the extracurricular athletics. It was item 4 in regards to the accident insurance coverage. It says the students must show proof of accident insurance coverage either by a policy purchased through the district approved insurance plan or a parent/guardian written statement that the student is covered under a family insurance plan. So for extracurriculars, we do have a rider on our insurance policy for accident insurance coverage. So every student is eligible to get that. That is accurate. The verbiage that was asked, should we keep the or parent family insurance plan, was the question. My feedback for the board would be, I think it's fine to keep because it does say or. So that at least gives families an option, because if the family doesn't want to use the district provided accident insurance plan over the extracurriculars, they can also still designate if they wanted to use their own. I don't think there's any harm by leaving the statement as is, would be my feedback.
So I think one of the open questions was, does somebody have to actively choose one or the other, or by nature of the permission to participate, it's wrapped up into there? So there's no vulnerability for the district.
Nope. So if student comes in, what we do say is we'll get them the information. If it's a nurse or we know an accident's happened, we provide them the information to be able to access that insurance, and then it's up to them to follow up.
Got it.
Why would it not be that the statement would read that District 75 provides whatever the accident insurance is for all students? Is that not true?
So we do have it. So instead of saying must show, we're just saying district provides.
Because they don't have anything to show, I don't think.
Right.
They don't give them a card.
We just provide it.
We just provide it, yes?
Yes, that would be correct. That would clean it up.
I mean, as long as we're gonna continue that, we continue to pay, you know, other districts do other things, they do what that says. You have to buy that separately. If I'm gonna participate in a sport, the parent has to purchase an accident
Right,
insurance plan if they not covered under their own healthcare plan.
correct.
So it would seem to me it would be cleaner if it just have it say what we actually do.
So,
So accident insurance is provided.
District 75 provides accident insurance for all students who participate in extracurricular activities.
or a parent may.
And there isn't any or to
No,
it.
There's no or.
I mean, they can do that if they want, that's fine too, but
Yeah.
District 75 does it, period. Because there isn't anywhere on the, I don't know, I haven't seen an application to, you know, do we have, you know,
We don't.
yeah, so just say what we do.
But I'd still say there's no harm in leaving, or the parent provides it themselves, because it still leaves the option there if the parent declines to use the insurance provided by the district.
Okay.
Right,
Right. But we're not requiring them to sign something.
we're not requiring to show proof.
Right, for showing proof.
Yep. So let's put District 75 provides accident insurance coverage, period. Well, policy through the district. Okay. Well, Lisa, were there other topics in 106 that you wanted to bring before the board?
So we did have adopt with district edits 6340, and that's basically just in one place to add the fact that the district administers other assessments and should report on it. So we had flagged that one as adopt with district edits.
With Star?
Yeah.
So I don't know if you want to particularly identify Star 360 in the policy, because we may choose to change systems, right? And in which case, then you'd have to go back and change the policy. It would be more generic to say that the district utilizes a standardized test and reports on it at least semi-annually.
Because this is to get it in addition to state required ones, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And that's currently what we use in Star 360.
Currently is. So you're just suggesting don't even put Star in there. Just
I wouldn't. I mean,
strike it and just say student assessments no less than twice per year.
Standardized student assessment. Because, you know, we're not talking about grades. We're not talking about running records, which we don't use anymore, I guess. We're not talking about, you know, those kinds of things. We're talking about a standardized achievement test of some sort.
So standardized assessment.
Right.
Okay. Good on press 106. Okay. Last topic on my list, to go over the equity statement. So being able to go over what were some takeaways from the February 2nd date. And then I know Lisa and Wells had worked on a draft statement, and then being able to look at establishing some kind of timelines is what was discussed. Anna, are you able to pull up the draft statement that they have?
you're still missing the preamble, if you will.
That was
Which
a
is
separate document.
Illinois Association of School Board statement.
So that was the supplement to the, that was added, what, yesterday? You got,
Do we have the full version that has the Illinois School Board Association preamble?
Is it the samples?
Pardon?
Are those the samples?
No.
but you sent, you added to the main folder.
That one? Oh, that's the full one. I have to look back. Sorry. Give me a minute and I'll pull it up.
Well, in the meantime, I hope everyone got to peruse the other packet, which had a wide variety of samples and get a flavor for what other districts have done. So I don't know if anybody, if we wanted to start there in the meantime and talk about what resonated with you, what one or two points from the other policies you liked. We thought we'd put something down on paper just to start a discussion, but we can start there.
Right. Can I ask I noticed that some districts call it a policy, some call it like a board policy, and some call them an board equity statement. Do we know if there's really a difference, or is that just terminology?
I would think there's a difference, because originally we were looking to make a statement on a certain topic, which is very different than a policy, which gives direction to the administration.
I think you're referring to the resolution. So it's definitely not a resolution. It does seem to be a statement, but like in looking at all of the ones, the samples that were provided, it was very helpful to see a lot of the statements from a lot of the other districts seem to be shorter and more just like concise statements of what they're going to strive to do, where it seemed to me, and I did like better looking at all of the different options, the ones that had a little bit more meat to them, in saying like how they're going to achieve that, rather than it just sounding like an aspirational goal, but actually, doing it like we're ours, the draft one, I liked how you did put more meat to it. I think the first draft that we saw that came in the packet was very short and sweet, but then I like the updated one that was sent out so that we can see that it did talk about the committee that we're trying to do and or that we're doing and what we're going to do to take a look at that, not just say we're going to do it or that we're going to strive to do it. So I did like that. And I thought that this, I read through the samples before I read through ours, and I did like, I made a note that I did like the one at Woodland that used the same model with equity means, inclusion means, and the committee tenets. So I liked that.
And that, to be frank, Christy, is what we stole for the intro of ours. So.
No, and I like it. That's what I'm saying. I think it's good. Thank you for the hard work you guys put into it.
That's right.
And I think I would just say that I'm trying to approach it the same way as with the portrait of the learner and the mission vision of having precise, clear language. Some of them get very lengthy, and whether that's a good thing, times again on the district, and that's why I don't know if you have the preamble up there, but that's what the Board Association recommends, that everyone's gonna be different. It's still, that's.
Well, and I know that one of the districts in particular had a whole glossary of definitions, which I thought was an interesting approach so that everyone had the same glossary, but I thought it was a little bit wordy to be putting that in there. So
Yeah.
Well, and again, our thought is that the equity committee, as we're envisioning it, might come up with a glossary.
Right.
We don't want to predefine that.
I agree.
Both administrative staff, staff, and non-certified staff of the district, and a good cross-section of the community with representation of various stakeholders goes through and learns more about what this potentially means and what the definition should be. And then they would come back and make reports back to the board, and they would say, yes, I think this are the meetings that we intended or thought to come up with, or help me explain that a little bit more, or why is it this, and go from there, rather than prejudging something.
And
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just saying, one thing that I did notice, the last sentence of the first paragraph, where it says Mundelein will identify and eliminate discriminatory practices. Shouldn't we probably say Mundelein District 75?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's gonna be, this was a draft.
Oh, I know. I that was just the only one that stood out to me. I'm not here to nitpick the rest of it. But I thought it was a really good effort. I thought it was a really good first draft, like you say. That's good.
The equity person at the Champaign District 4, because that policy had been around for 10 years, and she said they were in the process of reviewing it and giving it an overhaul. So it'll be interesting where they land.
Sure.
But they had basically not as much as what was in the packet, but their basic summary was still on their webpage. So. And actually, theirs came out of a consent decree order. So I don't know what their issues were down there, but that was what started theirs. So
I think it was equity.
but to me, that means a governmental agency told them to do
Someone
something.
told them to do it.
Yeah.
So, and Rockford has been under one of those too, off and on. So yeah, that can happen.
And she was actually surprised that their policy was in this. She's like, really? And I'm like, yeah. So I don't know. It was interesting conversation.
So one of the things that I'd like to ask then, with hearing like the sounding of the formation at least is in a good place people are talking about. There have been committee meetings taking place. If there's a committee structure that the board's asking to be put in place, I'd ask that we consider what committees are already formed and going on. Dan's been working with the District 75 Equity Committee. I know he's reached out and they're looking at partnering up with the committee that's been working at 120. And I also know in addition to that, there's been the Mundelein United group, which is comprised of almost solely all community members. That's also been going through a process similar to what we've been talking about. And what I'm suggesting is I think there's a real opportunity there, that there is a framework in place committee-wise that's looking at different terms and how we can look at organizations through a different lens, that we could provide some samples of what we could do with fulfilling that committee structure with that we have currently listed in this first reading. I think a key component of that would be the board representation on there of the committee work, which you certainly have outlined there. I think there is stuff in place. I guess is my point. We don't need to start from scratch.
So other than the Mundelein United and myself, who's been attending the professional development for equity, what other outside stakeholders are on that committee? Either one of those committees. I mean, I know the one is primarily outside, but the current one for District 75, other than myself, has no outside representation that I'm aware of.
So they got a plan getting ready to go. Can you fill me in on, Dan, with the next steps for that committee?
Sure. So like Dr. Myers said, we are working with 120. So like Dr. Myers said, we're working with 120. We have 14 District 75 people, 14 District 120, and some shared service people as well who are on that committee. That work will start next week, and we'll break into our 5 subgroups, one of them being the policy group. Policies, procedures, practices, those. And that will take us, those small groups will take us through some looking at our systems and everything, both for our community and all of that. And then we'll have an opportunity for some focus groups with community as well as with our teachers. So parents will be involved, or community members can be involved in the focus group piece, not necessarily in the committee structure piece right now.
So I think that's putting the cart before the horse. Just one man's opinion.
For that, so not saying it's perfect. So there is something there. We could look at how it could be different. If the board wants something different, definitely have all rights. It's your policy. You could create a board committee to be able to do that.
So we were told 2 months ago, I think, that we had no, say so or that type of thing regarding professional development. So took it to heart.
Okay.
I missed that. What was told to you? We asked about the professional development committee for equity, and you said that's the administrative committee, and this the board doesn't have purview over that. Okay. So the solution then is to create a totally separate committee that's going to do like very similar work instead of working together. I wouldn't, but if that's, I think, again, my bottom line, it has to have community membership from the start.
Okay, well, we've already passed that, so.
Well, it says, have we passed the policy?
No.
All right, then why have we passed it?
No, but I'm saying, you said it needs to be community involved from the start. I'm saying it's already started, so is there something that we could do to change things a little bit to make it have more community input?
Yeah, have community members on that committee. Okay. And have them report and have it be an open committee so that people know what's being proposed and reviewed.
Okay, I don't have a problem with that.
I don't either.
Okay, I guess I was really confused because when we talked, I didn't have that full document, when we talked at our meeting, and then you sent it to me, so it was good. I could see what it was. I guess I wasn't understanding why we would start a whole nother thing again when we already have something going. Why don't we work with what the structure that's already there and sort of create something that everyone can get behind?
Because the structure is currently only internal and it's not observable from the outside.
And we
Intentionally, in
and
my
we
opinion.
And we had agreed months ago that the IES, the Illinois Board Association guidance was what we wanted to follow.
Right.
I thought.
Which is why the preamble is, because, well, a big part of that is you always make sure that you have stakeholders involved in the very front before you develop a policy.
And I actually emailed that document to you.
Yeah, it was posted. It's in the February 23rd regular board meeting folder. So there's the regular folders, then there's the notice, the agenda, and the special, oh no, maybe it's not. Was it sent? I thought you had sent it to us.
So anyway, I guess the question is there a way that we could?
Or you sent it to all
Yeah,
of us.
yeah,
Yeah,
is
you
there a way
sent
we
it
can
to
all
all
work
of us.
together
Yeah,
on this
yeah,
stuff?
so you've all seen it. Yeah.
I'd imagine there's
creating
gotta be some way.
A totally new.
Yeah, I would agree.
Find something out. And I hear people, and Rob, I hear you say intentionally doing something with keeping people out. That is not the intent. Anytime we went into this.
What I've seen.
I'll explain. Anytime we started this and we've worked with a consultant group, they've asked us to start with a core group and keep it that group. Because when you start talking about challenges within a school system, or even bring up the topic of equity, they want that core group to first have an initial understanding.
So couldn't that
And
core
then
group have included
Be able to branch
community
out.
members?
At the time, that was not the recommendation, no. From them to work
Recommendation
through
from who?
the consultant groups that we were working with.
So
So no.
how many
it
were
wasn't.
involved? I'm sorry, did you interview multiple consultants?
So both two different groups, yes. I don't know the exact numbers of everybody they talked to, no.
Because again, if there was a broader cross-section, the selection of the consultant may have ended up being different than it was. Yes.
Well, so far I can tell you, at least in the 6 years I've been here, had 3 different consultants and they've all started in the same way. So if we want a requirement that we have somebody from outside the school district, that even if they're a parent, they can't be a school employee, if that's what you're saying, meaning a school employee that also lives in the community, that doesn't meet a parent component need, I hear you. But there's certainly a way, I think we can find a way to work together.
Well, one of the things I wanted to talk about, taking away from the presentation by Yvette, and then picking up on one of the sample policies was, and I think I mentioned this at another meeting, because I referenced Kurt, but we had some equity professional development at District 128, and the one that really jumped out at me and stood out was this idea of implicit bias. And Yvette talked about it a little bit, and so that was one of the things I wanted to talk about. And then when I was looking over the policies, like I said, the OPRF, the Oak Park River Forest, they have implicit bias, which the definition there, it's one of those one of those ones we talked about that has definitions. Means biases of which people usually are unaware or which operate at the subconscious level. Implicit bias is usually expressed indirectly. So sitting there in a gym with, I don't know, 150 people and hearing, we have an equity director in the district, and hearing her talk about this and talk about and giving examples of it, for me, it was just really eye-opening to see, like, you know, you don't know, like, stuff that affected you, like when you were a little kid or something, that manifests itself in certain ways as you get older. You know, things that I don't know, that you just think that are part of you or whatever, but it was just really eye-opening just to really see and think about, oh, you know, do I really, you know, think that? Or does that really, like, you know, somewhere in my subconscious, like, how does that affect how I treat my students? How does that affect how I treat people walking down the street? So I think it's a really important point just to bring out that's there. And, you know, and they weren't, when we were talking about it, it wasn't like, you know, this is wrong or you're a bad person. It was just like pointing out that it's there and just be aware of it and know that it's something that you can affect now that you're, you know, the kind of person you are. So for me, it's just a really important little piece that I didn't know anything about, and I just thought it was fascinating. So I just wanted to highlight that section from, as it turns out, both our presentation on the second and the policies we were looking at.
So I certainly have implicit biases, no doubt about it, you know, and so the question is, can you bring those to your conscious level so you can try to modify them and avoid them, right? And there's no doubt that I think that's, you know, that is important. But I'm not so sure that that is a major portion of what I have been experiencing. I've been experiencing things like terminology. You can't use the term anymore, opportunity gap. We shouldn't be, you know, using, you know, a lot of other things that are still normal items in most nomenclature with regard to school districts. You know, that's, so, yeah. It's the administration that chose the consultant. That's their prerogative. But I think what I'm saying at least is we, through our policy, should have a board committee that says it needs to have parents that are not educators necessarily, because I think there will be differences of opinion among some groups of parents as to what's appropriate to be communicated in the school with regard to a number of different issues that seem to be in this area.
And I think what we talked about in the pre-meeting was, I think there's a lot of areas to agree on. There's a lot of common ground. And there's going to be some areas that there's not. And it's how do you work through those pieces?
And if we don't have a conduit to communicate out to the broader community, that's going to be difficult. I think that it'll be unfortunate. We'll have headlines about an unfortunate situation where somebody presents something and it causes a big kerfuffle.
Big expensive.
Well, and and that's how you get consent decrees.
And, I like you, I even though I was a psych major, I was more industrial, but I had to take some basic classes, and the first thing they tell you in abnormal psych is, do not walk out of here thinking you're an expert. And of course, that's what you did. You all went, oh, and so-and-so's a narcissist, so-and-so is that. And so I approach this as, like I do my job. I'm asked to look at situations, gather relevant, valid, robust data, and make recommendations. And there's a lot of variety out there that I don't think came across in our training. There were studies cited that have been disproven. That the tool where you can assess yourself, it has a big disclaimer at the end, way end, that this shouldn't be used as a valid tool for basically anything. It's a nice exercise and maybe it helps you personally grow, but it's not a diagnostic tool. And so, there's questions around, and of course, brain science is evolving every single day. So, there's a lot of stuff out there that no one person can be an expert at it. So how can we construct a thoughtful policy in an area that seems to have, that's why I liked the slimmed down versions of this is what we want to achieve. We want to look at why there's achievement gaps, but there could be other reasons for it. And I didn't get the sense that there was any room to customize from the presentation we got. It was all or nothing, and that kind of was
Or
off-putting to
either
me.
you agree with it or you're wrong. That's kind of the sense I got.
Yeah,
It's
because
either
some
you
of the
agree with
people,
what's being said or you're wrong.
some of the people that are quoted and cited in her presentation have
Bill
all.
Ayers?
Well, I didn't see Bill Ayers, but I know he's in that space.
Yes,
Um,
well, he's in the PowerPoint that was sent to us, so.
So, there's different approaches within this field and different experts with different takes on it. The Abram Kendi author that was cited in one of the slides. That's interesting to read about that guy, so I would just suggest it.
So where do we go from here? I think that's the next.
Well, I would like to give everybody an opportunity to talk about things they took away from either the presentation or the sample policies that we have. I mean, I sort of talked about mine. Wells talked a little bit, not necessarily about that topic. Lisa talked a little bit about the presentation. Albert, Freddie, Wells want to talk about policies that we're looking at? The example policy?
Well, so I went through all of the example policies, and that's why I have to, in some ways, put it together. One was sort of a short front end with everything should, viewed, and we should non-discriminate and those kinds of things. And then The other one was from campaign policy where, again, as a way to ensure that we had broad representation and a way to have a conduit out to the stakeholders, a parent group, whether or clergy or whatever it may be, but something other than because I think we need to have that broad base of either support or not support before we go off into.
And that could take the time and dive into. There was so many components of what we presented. You could spend hours on just one or two rather than the 2 or 3 minutes. Because I think the topic's worthy of that. It's worthy of the time. I think it's been said that the DC 120 spent 3 years. We don't need 3 years, but we need a little.
Is there benefit to us doing a board committee with stakeholders and community members and then having a meeting with the administrative committee and moving forward on that point so that we're comparing notes and seeing if we're all on this, if both committees are on the same page, and if not, maybe we can learn something from each other and then move forward as a combined unit rather than competing. Because I don't think anybody intends to be competing with one another. It's just there's some different pieces to it, from the administration educational perspective of looking at various things. It is valuable in one aspect of it, but I don't think that what Wells is talking about from a community perspective based on what the IASB's approach is, I don't think that they have to be competing. I just think that they're slightly different approaches, and then there's still room for collaboration between the two, so that we can have, in the end, a formalized policy for the board to adopt that everybody's happy with, rather than tweaking it as we go.
Sorry, Freddie was going to talk.
Oh, no.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I thought the draft was great, honestly. It was a really good combination of all the other policies. I think a lot of us have talked about that Oak Park River Forest. That's the one I highlighted the most. While the definitions are wordy and it makes it longer, I think we could find it beneficial for, the body of who we're trying to, the policies being created for our district, right, for our parents and our students. That might be helpful, because a lot of people might not know those definitions. That's the way I look at it. And then my biggest thing, and I've been mentioning this since we started talking about this, is accountability and monitoring. Us creating this policy is great, but if we don't monitor or measure how we're moving the needle, for lack of better terms, and getting better and doing things that we should be doing, then the policy is not going to be very good. So finding a way, and I know it's in here, that it's addressed. That's why I'm saying that. We're going to be given data twice a year that shows what we're doing. So.
I think your question is in the line is what is that?
Correct. Right. That's my next question.
Yeah,
is what are we going to be given? What's the baseline? I think we need to know what the baseline is. Where are we trying to move from? From whether it's from hiring practices or programs for different students. What's the baseline? And maybe not what's the goal, but again, we have to measure ourselves on how we're moving the needle twice a year. So it's in there. I appreciate that that's in there. But again, so the definitions, I'm just throwing it out there, might be beneficial for, the makeup of our community. To fully understand what all, we might understand it here, but our community might not know what some of those things are.
Yeah, I agree with that. Anything you want to add, Ron?
Again, I think I've made my feelings clear from the beginning. I think that the draft statement here, the draft policy looks very good. It's very simple, very clear, straightforward. I just think the approach we're taking to this is we're going to wind up alienating more people than we purport to help. And I think some of the people and materials that we have chosen to work towards this goal are suspect, to say the least. That's all I have to say.
Okay. Well, is there anything else?
Well, again, so we did try to put in the last paragraph where we're talking about the committee, will review data disaggregated by, race, ethnicity, and social economic status and that type of thing. So we did try to put that in, and then I guess with regard to, towards the front, the purpose of the committee is to review and discuss the following items, and we put in some of the things that some students are utilized and are admitted to, and other students are not. And that, as I understand it, one of the big challenges sometimes of, are we to the best of our ability selecting those students without either implicit or explicit bias, right? And so that was one of the big things that I thought we should be thinking about, and having, the definitions of, these are some definitions that may be useful to people. That's, I think that would be certainly appropriate when and if we get a committee together, and we have to try to help them understand what are we sort of talking about and looking at. That would certainly be useful. But again,
I think
my hope is that the committee would help develop those as well, and they would read these as a first draft and say, well, I agree with that, but wait a minute, what about this one or something else, rather than right now us coming up with the definition.
Yeah,
You started this
and quantifying things like who has access to take Big Ten math or whatever. I don't know what the right word is for the gift. It used to be called the gifted program, whatever it's called now. I over my how many years?
Project Challenge.
Project Challenge, yeah. So when my 24-year-old was in kindergarten, I've been on Project Challenge review committees 3 times, and they were always looking at how do we capture everyone. Did we administer a separate test at the lower grades in Spanish or whatever the native language was? And so those are the participation rates in these different types of programs is one measurement. And if there's a difference, how do you explain it? There could be 5 different reasons why a child isn't in a program. And so my concern is the default assumption by some of this material is that it's race. And is that fair when in fact what we should be looking at is the selection progress, or what we've seen with the curriculum implementation issues over the last 5 years that Dale highlighted. What's the crux of the issue to solve the problem?
So then I guess the last thing that we talked about doing was talk about a timeline. So somewhere less than 3 years, according to Lisa. And then, I don't know what the other one looks like.
We're a high-performing team, 3 weeks.
I'm not sure how we figure that out with a group of people. The timeline.
Well, we had talked about, this discussion was a first step.
Right.
Let's look at kind of the end goal and then back off to what we need to do that.
So the end goal would be a board policy that we would approve and put in the policy manual. Correct. Okay.
So we had talked about, I have my notes. Well, I guess that was my notes for what we were looking for today. Sorry.
So I don't know what would the policy committee think would be a reasonable timeline to do all this work we need to do to come up with a board policy.
So again, the challenge is some of the persons, if we implement this committee, will be brand new, right? So they're going to have to get up to speed pretty quickly. Some of them will not be brand new, and some of them from D75 will have had a certain number of hours, and someone from 120 will have even more. So that's going to be a challenge to meld them together to get some of the stakeholder community members up to speed, I think. I don't know. I mean, I'm willing to listen to, thoughtful comments about how to do that, and then utilize the amount of training and time that has been spent by our staff to learn about this as well. But so I'm not sure. And again, I think it's important that this be an open process so that outside persons, if they're interested, can weigh in on topics.
It might mean the internal team puts the brakes on a little bit, quite frankly. I don't know.
So this is the IASB statement on local school board equity policies. Member school boards have contacted IASB to request that the association provide the board with an equity policy. While the IASB staff can provide a board with a sample policies related to diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is what we received from them. We believe that providing a policy template can actually be an impediment to boards of education conducting thoughtful, deep conversations around issues of race, diversity, equity, and inclusion. IASB recognizes that everyone benefits when all students have access to the educational resources and rigor they need in all times and circumstances. The pursuit of equity, opportunity, and excellence for every child starts with a deep conversation that the ISBA staff can assist with. That's a commercial. It's designed to support school boards in this work and pave the way for development of a standard definition of equity. That's their quotations. Board should also engage community stakeholders to inform them of the development of a local equity policy. So that's what what we were talking about before. So I guess,
and I intended they had a webinar workshop on this subject for 2 hours a few months ago.
Yeah, we both went.
Yeah, and I can tell you the workshop content was very different from what we were being presented last month.
Okay.
Different. Can you elaborate on that a little? I mean, what were some striking differences?
It was much more about learn your demographics of your school district, understand what the differences are in their achievement, trying to identify what might be an impediment to changing those differences, and involving stakeholders rather than a page of word items that are fairly typical and a new list of word items that are the new correct items according to some expert. And going and looking at everything from the point of view of being radically anti-bias, radically anti-racial. And if you listen to the book that I forgot the gentleman's name, but he doesn't believe that, again, a lot of this deals with different race than our construct. We have a student population that is 30-40% low income and 30-40% Latinx, which is the new word. We do not have a lot of students that are Black. And so, the connotation of a lot of things are from a holdover from enslavement really doesn't doesn't apply a lot to District 75, in my mind. Maybe I'm totally wrong, and that's another bias I have.
So
I don't-
am I hearing you correctly, Wells, that you think that our equity policy, equity focus, our equity efforts should be more student focused on our demographic and fixing the issues that we have within our demographic, as opposed to a blanket, in my opinion, political movement masquerading as equity policy.
I believe the first part, very definitely, yes. Whether or
Well,
not I
that
want to
was my-
characterize the second
that was-
part, I don't know, but the first part, yes.
And I think the part that was missing from what we saw was a collaboration. And what I mean by that is I've seen pop up recently a lot of stuff about like team building. Aren't we team building? And team building is all about bringing people together, not dividing them. And I've seen from business people. And I'm going to get you guys the recording. They just haven't posted it yet. I attended a university-sponsored discussion around how can we bring the country together again. And it was all about finding commonalities and getting over the division. So it's almost like this evolution, there's an evolution, at least at certain academic levels, away from what we were presented to a more finding common ground than I thought we saw. If that makes any sense. I don't know if I articulate.
Makes perfect sense to me. Let's talk about
And
what
I
we all
talked
have.
I talked to them actually this morning, and they said the speaker, he's the provost. Well, it was sponsored by the provost of Case Western, and it was the guest speaker was the University of the South's new president. And he has an extensive background in diplomacy in Africa. It was fascinating to listen to these guys talk about how they do want people to ask them. And he gave examples that were just cringeworthy questions that he was asked when he was made president of this university. He said, I want these people to ask these questions so I can answer them because they need to be answered.
Well, and because it sparks a conversation.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and instead of you're evil, no, you're evil. No,
Exactly.
now
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
talking to one another, trying to figure out.
Exactly. And
Yeah,
so that's kind of what I've been walking away with when I listen to people discussing how they would handle differences of opinion in this arena. And again, finding the common ground, because I truly believe it's there. And I think all of you do too.
Okay. I don't know where we go from here, but I think we're coming to a logical conclusion. I don't know. Do we need to do some reflecting and think about
Yeah, and then maybe
what our
feedback
timeline
about
would be?
what next steps would be in each of ours minds about how you would, how we should proceed next.
Okay. Does that seem reasonable? Yep. Okay, so let's do that. Let's be prepared then to talk about reflection about equity up to this point, and then what we think our next steps and our sort of overreaching timeline might be to come up with an equity policy.
And I know we've all been tossed in articles and things, but if something really speaks to you, then let's share it.
Yeah, everyone's been really good about sharing interesting
And
things that,
continue to do that.
yeah, yep.
And if the link doesn't work, let somebody know.
Yeah, I'd ask if you have literature, either A, do like you've been doing, please do so you don't respond to all to get the literature. Or if you wanted, we could always send them and put them all in the Friday updates too for everybody.
I've actually just been copying articles off the web and then putting it into a Word document so then nobody has to worry about a link.
Yeah.
working or not working.
Okay, that'll work. That's it in my report.
Great, okay. We're gonna move on to the consent agenda. Does anyone have anything that they want to pull out of the consent agenda or any? Question? In the, just keeps popping. The question about the, I've lost it. I think the January 19th.
I got it up.
Yeah, it's the bottom of page 3, it's like another call to order on there. Like the one we would do at the after president's prerogative, just, you know.
Oh.
The bottom of page 3.
Was that bringing us out of?
Well, if it's after an action item and it's
Yeah,
after president's prerogative,
yeah,
so I think that should be, does that make sense?
There's something weird. Did we have to reestablish action or something?
Yeah, we did.
Yes.
Good.
It went to Fluey. So I think that's what.
Good memory.
But by limited amount of research, you only do one call to order at the beginning of the meeting. You don't do it.
Well, I think we had to reestablish a quorum. So I don't know what it's called.
Just seems weird we had to establish a quorum right before we adjourned.
Well, isn't it because we came back from executive session, I guess, just to make sure nobody left at that point?
Yeah, but there's an action item and president's prerogative before that, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, so we probably did that, probably in the wrong order. Probably after we came out of executive session.
It's just the stuff that we,
It's just in the wrong.
I think the president's prerogative needed to come after. I think you're right. After the call to order.
And the action.
Well, wouldn't it also be before the action? So the call to order when you come out of
Yes.
the closed
Yeah.
session, establish a quorum again, and then go from there. Do action.
I just don't understand that. We never did that before.
Well, part of the challenge is when you got there's special provisions, actually you have to do roll calls on a whole bunch of stuff now. You're not all in the same room, that sort of thing. Normally would be able to vote.
I haven't seen that do another call to order. Like happened for a few months.
I'm only hearing like every third word. I don't know why.
Sorry, I might be mumbling. My bad.
Well, I think because a lot of times when we come back from because we go into executive session, we establish quorum, we call to order, we discuss, then we adjourn from executive session, then we come back, and a lot of times, even though it's on my list that we're supposed to call to order and take roll call, sometimes Kevin forgets to do that, and then I remind you that we need to do that, and we go back and do that. But
I don't forget, I do it on purpose.
okay, well, as the secretary, which I hope I'm not for very much longer, just tell me then what to do, because obviously the little tally sheet I'm given, I'm trying to, complete.
Meeting and then say, oh no, we didn't really mean that, we're coming back again. You know what I mean? You can't adjourn a meeting a couple of different times.
Well, but you do adjourn from the open meeting to a closed meeting, and then you have to come back into the open meeting.
How do you adjourn the meeting is what I'm saying. You don't adjourn the meeting more than once. Anyway, let's press on. Does anyone have anything they want to remove from the agenda?
No.
Okay. I move we approve the consent agenda as presented.
I will second.
Seconded by Mrs. Fingerhut. Secretary, please call the roll.
Holly,
Aye.
Fingerhut, aye. Price,
Aye.
Gallegos.
Aye.
DuPont,
Aye.
St. Clair,
Aye.
That passes, correct?
yes.
All right, all
I
right.
presume Kurt's still not there, so I didn't call him.
That's perfect. I'd like to invite Zach, District 75 alum, back to the mothership. Congratulations, Brian. Okay, board action items. First one is the transportation agreement. I move the Mundelein Elementary School District 75 accept the superintendent's recommendation to adopt the fiscal year 21 transportation agreement amendment as presented.
Second.
Second by Mr. DuPont. Will the secretary please call the roll?
Holly,
Aye.
DuPont.
Aye.
Fingerhut, aye. Gallegos.
Aye.
Price,
Aye.
St. Clair.
Aye. And you can't always make me last, Christy.
I'm not. I'm trying to move it around like I was told.
Under Recommendation Administration, I move the Board of Education, Mundelein Elementary School District 75, accept the superintendent's recommendation to approve the health aide job description as presented.
Second. Secretary, call the roll.
Price,
Aye.
St. Clair.
Aye.
Holly,
Aye.
Gallegos.
Aye.
DuPont.
Aye.
Fingerhut, aye.
I move the Board of Education accept the superintendent's recommendation to accept the 2021-2022 school calendar as presented.
Second.
Secretary, please call the roll.
Holly,
Aye.
Wait, I'm sorry. Did you say 2021?
The current year, 2021 to 2020, sorry, next year, 2021 to 2022.
Okay.
So the next school year.
Okay.
starting in August. So I'm sorry, was that Wells that seconded?
Yeah.
Okay.
Aye.
Okay. Gallegos.
Aye.
St. Clair.
Aye.
DuPont.
Aye.
Fingerhut. Aye.
So what are we gonna do for the next year? Are we holding on that?
You don't want to vote on it?
You have a choice, you can just go.
Just go ahead, yeah, just.
Okay, we'll bring it back. I move the Board of Education accept the superintendent's recommendation to adopt the vision statement as presented.
Second.
Mrs. St. Clair seconded. Please call the roll.
Holly.
Aye.
St. Clair.
Aye.
Price.
Aye.
DuPont.
Aye.
Gallegos.
Aye.
Fingerhut. Aye.
Upon the recommendation of administration, I move the Board of Education, Mundelein Elementary School District 75, accept the superintendent's recommendation to approve PES Policy 106, second and final reading as revised.
Second.
Second by Mrs. St. Clair. Please call the roll.
Price.
Aye.
St. Clair.
Aye.
Fingerhut. Aye. DuPont.
Aye.
Gallegos.
Aye.
Holly.
Aye. Those are all the action items. Next up is executive session. I move that the Board of Education convene into executive session at 9:39 p.m.
Second.
Second by Mr. Gallegos. Secretary, please call the roll.
For the purpose of?
Oh, sorry. For the purpose of the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the public body or legal counsel for the public body, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against an employee of the public body or against legal counsel for the public body to determine its validity. Number two, collective negotiating matters between the public body and its employees or their representatives, or deliberations concerning salary schedules for one or more classes of employees. Number three, discussion of minutes lawfully closed under the Open Meetings Act, whether for purpose of approval by the body of the minutes or semi-annual review of the minutes as mandated by Section 206 of the Illinois School Code. Secretary, please call the roll.
Holly.
Aye.
Gallegos. St. Clair.
Aye.
DuPont.
Aye.
Finger Hut. Aye. Price.
Aye.
Do I need to go out and come back in?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, it's gone. Thank you. Okay, we are reconvening in open session at 10:15 PM. For the sake of a quorum, will the secretary please call the roll?
Holly.
Here.
St. Clair.
Here.
Gallegos.
Here.
DuPont.
Here.
Price.
Here.
Finger Hut. Here.
Okay, I move that the Wonderland Elementary School District 75 Board of Education approve the agreement for shared superintendent services based on the recommendation of the board president, because he can't recommend his own agreement. That's what I decided.
Second.
Second by Mr. Gallegos. Will the secretary please call the roll?
Holly.
Aye.
Gallegos. Finger Hut. Aye. Price.
Aye.
St. Clair.
No.
DuPont.
No.
Motion passes. I move that we approve the January 19, 2021 executive session minutes. Second. Mr. Price, seconded. Secretary, please call the roll.
Holly.
Aye.
Price.
Aye.
St. Clair.
Aye.
Gallegos.
Aye.
Finger Hut. Aye. DuPont.
President's prerogative. I will send out the meeting thing that I send out after every meeting. The other thing, later this week, you will get an updated version of the superintendent's evaluation. So if you could please fill that out and get that back to me, I would appreciate it. Remember, or for the new people and for the old people to remind, it's I think it's a 1 through 5 scale for a bunch of questions. Most of them related to the most of them related to the shared services agreement, exhibits and appendices. And the sort of the standing rule we have is so if it's 1 being low, 5 being high, if you do a 3 or lower, you need to write in an explanation for why you gave that grade or that score. Okay, so we have some foundational stuff, and then there's a place where you can just put anything at the end, I believe. Yeah, I think that's what it is. Okay, so if you can fill that out, that would be great.
Do we have a review from Dr. Myers?
Just wrote that down. I'll have to get that to you.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
I'll do my best to have that to you by Friday.
Okay. I feel like I'm missing one thing. I don't know.
So I'll just, one cute thing, so I'm offended at being called old.
Who called you old and what? Old Gordon?
I said, yeah. All right, noted. Senior board. For the record, I
Implicit
noted.
biases rearing their ugly head, Wells.
Okay. I was going to say one other thing, but I don't remember what it is. So, anyone have anything they want to talk about? Anything for future meetings?
We had talked briefly about rearranging order of things. Remember? Remember?
Oh, yeah. Can you remind me what we talked about? Sorry.
I left it noted home, but
Sorry.
we had talked about the flow of things and being able to discuss things before
Oh, I know
voting
what
on
you're
it.
saying.
And
Yeah, this this is something that we talked about a while back. I'm not sure. It was just, you know how we do all the motions in one fell swoop? That's something that Dr. Myers brought to us. I'm not, I always hate to have the public think that it's just like a rubber stamp kind of thing. And I feel like that in this format, it's kind of like that. I don't know if anybody else feels that way, but I've always sort of felt that way. I think.
Do you mean the consent agenda?
No, I'm talking about the individual action items.
Okay.
I think it does. I think on the positive note, I think it speeds that all up at the end. And I think I wish we would have done that like a few years ago when there were some people on the board that would talk and talk and talk and talk and talk, and we could have. I think it would have helped then. And this board doesn't seem to do that. I think everyone is really pretty much concise with what they have to say, I guess.
And
So
does their homework.
that's probably also true. So,
but we don't know what the new board will be like.
So I just throw it out there. Just how about let's think about it, and then we can talk about it next time.
Because I think there was also a feeling there wasn't enough in-person discussion, although the
Right.
logging of the
The
questions
questions, yeah, that was effective.
was nice.
Although I didn't realize, and when I realized this morning I still hadn't received a response, then I thought, oh, maybe I can go back in and look at it, and then I saw all the responses. So now that I know to do that, yeah, and I did, but
Check your Google Docs for replies, yeah, but.
yeah, and I did that this morning when I thought about that. I was like, oh, I wonder if that's been filled out, and it was. So I had the answers, and that was helpful.
Oh, I have one thing, Kevin. I would have liked to get an earlier notice about the finance committee meeting on Monday that we got on Friday afternoon.
Are those set?
So they're scheduled, yeah, they're
Are they
scheduled for
scheduled?
the
They're
whole year,
scheduled already.
yeah.
I actually was gonna do the same thing and complain about the same thing, but then I went back to
Are they
the email
scheduled?
and there's a calendar. Yeah,
Where's
so
the,
Where
where's
is
the
it?
calendar at?
T had shared it the first time that she, like when we
Right.
established
I will look
it.
for it.
So yeah,
Okay.
if not, let me know. But I have it in the.
I will look for it. So go ahead. There was one other thing I was going to say. I'm trying to think. Oh yeah, it's at least for me personally, it's really hard when stuff gets. And we've talked about this before, and it's been better. But when we get updates like on a Tuesday afternoon, because I don't have time to look at it between work and the meeting. So if we could do it earlier on Tuesday, that'd be great. But like, because there was something that was updated, like a PowerPoint was updated at like
Oh,
4:30
yeah,
today.
the
And there's
teaching
no, I don't have a
learning
chance to
report,
look at
yeah.
it that
So
that
a lot
late.
of it's based off of feedback that we get from the board. I do try to turn it around to people quick.
Okay.
Don't try to delay, so I understand you need it as quick as you can, so.
Okay.
Do try
Yeah,
to
so
accommodate that.
the additional information about the concurrent teaching and the schedule and all that sort of stuff is probably a reflection of, there were probably a reasonable number of questions about what does that mean on the 15th?
Right.
So, but, yeah. So don't we have to make yes or no decisions about retaining or not releasing people next month?
Yes, March board meeting.
And it's probably been really hard to try to do evaluations, but it'd be really nice to know if there are any that we're not retaining other than non-continual contractual person.
Anybody that'd be released would be just a non-renewal. There wouldn't be any risk.
Okay. Thank you. It's helpful.
Yeah, we would just be looking at non-tenured staff right now.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. All right, anything else for the good of the group? Okay, I move that we adjourn. Can I have a second, please? We need to call the roll because we're
Second.
virtual. Mr. Dupont, seconded. Secretary, please call the roll.
Holly.
Aye.
Dupont.
Aye.
Fingerhut. Aye. Price.
Aye.
St. Clair.
Aye.
Gallegos.
We are adjourned.
See you later.